So now delighted to be joined on the line by Peter Bleksley, a former founding member of the Scotland Yard Undercover unit, an author, a broadcaster, the man hunting Kevin Parle, a massive sports fan, and maybe most importantly, a die-hard Queen's Park Rangers fan. Peter, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And like we spoke off air, it's probably not the best time to be a QPR fan at the moment.
Oh, it's absolutely shocking. We've had a really bad week on a number of levels. Firstly, there was a programme on Channel 5 that went out a couple of nights ago about Paddington Railway Station. And on that show, they showed a clip of the Rangers players and staff turning up to travel to an away game. Now, you would think that it's not too difficult a thing for young men to be able to get on a train on time. They had an exclusive carriage all to themselves, eh? Oh, the privileges of being an average footballer, right? Anyway, it showed during this show that three of the Rangers players who had sauntered off, treating their lives as their own, couldn't actually, get themselves promptly onto the train. So the staff, the railway staff, who were trying to help them, who were trying to facilitate these people getting into their own private carriage, are rushing around the station, trying to herd these players together and say, get a move on, get on the train. Right? Well, to me, it looks like a PR disaster because I thought those players looked like they were entitled, privileged, ill-disciplined people who couldn't pull their finger out and get onto a train on time. It was bad PR. It looked really bad, and we know they live lives completely different to ours, but these are not multi-millionaire Premiership footballers we're talking about. This is a team who can't beat an egg at the moment in the Championship.
Yeah, so you can feel the passion, Peter, for being a QPR fan. Look, well, I suppose we're going to get into a little bit of all that in the show. We've a lot of things planned. It's going to be a great discussion. Firstly, I'm going to ask you about what was it like growing up in 1960 South London in Bleksley Heath, maybe the role of sport, but also there was a huge moment in 1966 and England winning the World Cup. Have you any initial kind of memories of that?
I was born in December 1959, so I was 6 when England won the World Cup. And do you know what? It's a real shame, but I have no memory of it. And I don't know why. At the time, my parents were embroiled in a really miserable marriage. And I remember the misery, the fighting and the smashing of things and my dad's, rampant kind of uncontrollable drinking. I remember all the misery that brought to my house. But I don't remember the World Cup in 1966, and that's really kind of sad. I have no recollection of it whatsoever.
No, and what's your earliest then sporting memory and growing up? Do you remember going outside like so many? And maybe that's a huge part of modern society that people don't go out onto the road with their neighbours and kick a ball. Is that something you would have done?
Well, but my earliest sporting memory, funnily enough, came from my abusive dad, who came home one night and he wasn't exactly renowned for coming home. And he said to me, he'd been working at a football ground that day. And I guess I was probably about 7 years old, something like that. And so my interest in football was just beginning to grow. And I said to him, where were you working? What ground were you working at? And he said, oh, you'll never have heard of them. You won't have heard of them. Don't worry about it. I said, no, tell me, what ground were you working at? He said, well, they're in the 3rd division. He said, they're called Queen's Park Rangers. And that just stuck with me. So on the Saturday, I looked in the newspaper to see who they were playing. And on the Sunday, I looked in the newspaper to see how they got on. And here we are, over half a century later. It is still a massive part of my life, that club. I've been a season ticket holder there for as long as I can remember. My 3 sons have all had QPR drummed into them. Unfortunately, they're all supporters, although we are all, as you can imagine, rather gloomy this morning on the back of a 3-0 defeat last night to Barnsley, who hadn't won a game all season. But anyway, you see, you get me starting about Rangers, and I frankly don't stop.
And maybe it's a pity it wasn't a top six club that you picked, but maybe that's the beauty of it, and like the beauty of supporting a club, because for a lot of people in Ireland who support a League of Ireland club, or in Gaelic Games who support a lower tier county, there it makes those wins even special. So when you do get promoted, or win a championship, or go into the Premier League, I suppose it makes those memories that little bit special, that you were there, in barren years when, like you said, you were in the third division, and your connection to QPR never wavered in that sense.
It's been a complete roller coaster. We've had glory days of the captain of England, Jerry Francis, captaining our club as well. Glory days, Stan Bowles, Rodney Marsh, Les Ferdinand. The list goes on and on and on. And apologies to Phil Clark, Dave Clement, the late Dave Clement, Ian Gillard, and many, many other wonderful players who have worn the shirt. But one of the greatest things to have come out of supporting a club like me, and it's not been easy, is the friendships that I've made over the years. My mate who I sit with, we've been sitting next to one another for over 30 years. We've done home and away. I don't do as many away games now as I used to. I kind of reined back on that when my two youngest sons came along. We still have a naughty boy day out, sort of 2 or 3 times a season, where we all get on a train bright and early, disappear up to Birmingham or Sheffield or somewhere like that. And as the wheels start turning, as the train pulls out of Euston or King's Cross, all you can hear is a psh as the first can opens. And it's a naughty boys day out. But I used to do home and away. When we were in the third tier back at the turn of the century, I did all 46 league games one season. Which was bonkers, and but there you go. That's how much they're in my life. But it's the friendships that we've made, whether they are the friendships with my mate that I go to every game with, every home game with, or whether it's the friendship with the editor of the fanzine that I've known for 40 years or so. And I've never been to his house, and he's never been to my house. But when we get together on a Saturday, there's a connection, and we talk about Rangers and all those people that you just nod at. That you've known for decades, and you just have a nod and a smile because you're a kindred brethren. So the friendships are really are what stand out for me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people will relate to that connection of the colours being the main connection between the person sat beside you and yourself. Like you said there, growing up, you just fell in love with QPR in the sense. What other roles of sport did it play in your life? Did it connect you to different parts of society, maybe, if you like, or were you an avid sports fan growing up?
Well, going to as many Rangers games as I have over the decades, and of course, for a lot of that time, me being in the police, I really got a very good insight into what it was like to be on the other side of football policing. And I got some pretty rough treatment at the hands of police officers over the years, because you don't pull your warrant card out and say, actually, I'm one of yours, as they're herding you like third class citizens and treating you abysmally, and sort of kettling you after away games and stopping you from leaving the ground and all that kind of stuff. I've been on the wrong end of some pretty abysmal football policing and some good football policing. But so that kind of gives you a great insight. And I took quite a lot of that into when I worked undercover as a cop, because I'd experienced that, and I could weave it into conversations.
Yeah, and you could have blended in, if you like. Was there any other sports that you took to when you were younger? What was it like growing up where you were? Was it a big football area?
No, not really. I mean, it's a South London borough, but I can't claim it was the tough side of the street. It was pretty leafy and, working middle class type aspirational sort of place. So, but cricket, I absolutely love cricket. And I retired from playing only about 3 years ago. And I have been chairman of a very large local cricket club. And I gave up the chairmanship at the end of last year because it took up so much of my time. And of course, I've got work pressures and family pressures, and something I had to give. But cricket is just a sport that I absolutely adore. and it's a lifelong love, like it is football. Boxing, I've always loved boxing, and I boxed for the police. I'll give you a clue as to the amount of boxing ability that I had. They gave me a nickname, which was Horries, and that was short for horizontal. Right? So that gives you a bit of an indicator. But I won many, many more bouts than I ever lost. And here, all these years later, this dates from 1982, Metropolitan Police Athletic Association Lafone Cup, and here it is. Right, you'll see it's so tiny that it's not the winner's trophy. Unfortunately, there was a far, far better boxer than me that has the winner's trophy proudly sitting on his mantelpiece somewhere, I should expect. And by crikey, he gave me a battering that night. But yeah, no, I loved boxing and have some wonderful memories for that. And I've been a huge sports fan of many, many sports.
Yeah, and just a couple of things to touch on. Boxing, had you boxed before you joined the Met Police?
No, so I joined the police cadets at 17 and trained, got remarkably fit because fitness was such a large part of what they did. And I got incredibly fit. And towards the end of 1977, I was getting ready to have my debut bout in the early part of 1978. But unfortunately, the night before Christmas Eve, I went out in Bexley Village with a few mates and got involved, not our fault, I hasten to add, in an enormous punch-up. And I copped a right-hander, which was like a sledgehammer, and fractured my cheekbone. So that scuppered me boxing the following year. And in fact, I didn't actually start boxing. I kind of stopped training at that point and picked it up a couple of years later when I was a PC in uniform at Peckham Police Station. Then I started my decidedly average boxing career again.
And at the moment, it almost seems like, last year, maybe even before COVID, that boxing and British boxing, heavyweight boxing was in such a strong position. And maybe going back to maybe your childhood, had you any early memories of maybe some of the legendary boxing fights, or even maybe hearing stories of like the Thriller in Manila or anything like that?
Frazier, Foreman and Ali. That was my era. I mean, just truly, truly amazing. And of course, British middleweight boxing, when we had Alan Minter, and then at other weights, we had so many world champions, John H. Tracy, and I'm forgetting many, many others. And of course, I was boxing myself during the whole Hearns, Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard era. I've seen some of the most gracious, wonderful warrior fighters ever to grace the planet, not to mention, while I'm talking about British middleweights, of course, Eubank, Watson, Nigel Benn, great, great eras. And of course, with great pride, I have to say, where did Barry Mcguigan win his world title? At what was then called Loftus Road, the home of Queen's Park Rangers, which is now the Kian Prince Foundation Stadium. Barry Mcguigan beat Eusebio Pedrosa at Loftus Road. Oh, the memories.
Yeah, a lot of people will remember fondly on Barry Mcguigan and his time and what he did, and maybe we'll kind of discuss into some of those issues later. Another, this got maybe gone back onto cricket, and cricket itself. I'm a massive cricket fan myself, but you think of that great West Indian team with Viv Richards and Clive Lloyd and sort of the guile and the energy they brought to cricket and what it did to the Caribbean nation in England, if you like, in that sense. And when you see clips of it now, and there's brilliant documentaries of that West Indian team, is that something that maybe got you hooked into cricket as well? I know a lot of people speak of that West Indian team as a real got attraction to the game of cricket back then.
Well, I've only ever played cricket as an opening bat, so of course my admiration for batters is enormous. But Michael Holding and Andy Roberts, opening the bowling for the West Indies, plus, of course, many others, brilliant bowlers that supported them. Jeff Thompson and Dennis Lilly, opening the bowling for the Aussies. These were the kind of people that, in my dreams, I wanted to face. Of course, stumps would have been splintered, probably along with my thumbs and my forearms, and God knows what else. because I was never remotely good enough to deal with those world titans. But yeah, if you look back to the whole blackwash era, when the West Indies just came over to the UK and steamrolled the English team, I remember seeing headlines at the time on the back pages saying, "Is this the death of spin?" You know, people were actually discussing in the media that spin bowling was going to become a lost art, a thing of the past. And then, of course, in recent years, people like Shane Warne and Murray have made it the great and vitally important part of the game that it is. And my youngest son, who's the only one of my three sons still playing cricket, is a left-arm orthodox spinner. So, of course, I have a particular kind of fondness now for watching spin bowlers, whereas I used to have a particular fondness for carving them over cow corner. But,
I wish I could only dream of hitting a shot like that. But maybe, what was your earliest memory of going to a cricket match at that stage? Was it something that, like, you know, you kind of just like QPR in a sense, you just kind of fell into it, or what was cricket like in your early life?
well, of course, Test match cricket was on the TV, but we only had 2 and then 3 channels back in those days. So I would sit and watch my spare time, watching the likes of Yes, Boycott. Wake Up, I can hear people falling asleep now. No, he was a mighty, wonderful player. You know, a bit of an irascible and questionable character, of course, in recent years, but a wonderful, wonderful cricketer who scored more than 100 hundreds. And I grew up watching him opening the batting for England. And I kind of learned how to play a forward defensive shot by watching Jeff Boycott, because there wasn't the wonderful Colts cricket coaching now that youngsters have, particularly at our club, and I suspect your club, and thousands around the globe. So I taught myself how to bat by watching it on telly, and then plucked up the courage to walk into a local cricket club close to my home, and they accepted me, and I learnt the game and played with some wonderful cricketers, and it became a huge, huge part of my life. And I was very fortunate enough to play in some very good sides and have more than a modicum of success playing the game.
Exactly. And maybe if we move on to your career, you've spoken in a few different interviews about your path to joining the Met Police, and it maybe mightn't be the most conventional way, but you still joined the Met Police in 1978. Maybe do you want to discuss how it came about and your first couple of years as a police officer?
Yeah, well, as a kid, you know, after my dad had disappeared, and it was quite frankly good riddance to bad rubbish, I was a real rudderless ship. I had no male role models to follow, to learn from. And I just became a bit of a dick, part of my language. You know, I got involved in petty crime. I truanted from school because my dear mum, who's still with us, fortunately, at 92, my dear mum was going to work every day, getting up at the crack of dawn and disappearing out of the house to put food on the table and a shirt on my back. And so she didn't know what I was up to. And yeah, I truanted from school, kind of flunked my exams, only cobbled together just about enough to avoid me having to take the police entrance exam, and got involved in petty crime and bunking off school, which was foolish. But kind of through that grew my fondness for horse racing, because I would bunk off school, go home, get changed out of my school uniform. Don't follow any of this, kids, please, please don't. Put on my regular clothes and blag my way into the betting shop. Have a bet on what was then the ITV3. They had 3 races on ITV in the afternoon. Go round to my mate's house and see how the horses that I backed had got on. And it was a patent, so I had a patent which was 7 bets, a trio or whatever they call it these days. 3 singles, 3 doubles, and a 3-handed, you know, treble. And it would be 5p. I'd have a 5p patent, so it'd be 35p in total. And one afternoon, bingo, it came up, and I won 17.5 quid. And the difficulty I had trying to hide that money from my mum, because suddenly I was Keiko with cash. I won 17.5 quid, which was an absolute fortune to this truanting, irresponsible child. But yeah, so part of my love for horse racing grew out of that. But yeah, truanting and gambling. Truanting's a nonsense, dopey thing to do. And I don't gamble anymore. Let's just say, you know, let's just put it that way. And my bank account is somewhat better for it.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people have those memories of, when they're younger, even on the Grand National, and I know in our house, my dad would come around and you just pick a name spontaneously, and if you ever won it or whatever, there'd be that sense of joy. And like you said there, you were a little bit not the conventional route for joining the police. There was a little moment in your life that happened that made you. There was a chance encounter with someone at your home.
Yeah, I came home one night. I was 16, this errant youth. Walked into the lounge of the flat that I shared with my mum, and there was an enormous, great uniformed police officer sitting in our lounge. And the first thing I thought was, "Oh, crikey, what am I going to get nicked for?" But fortunately, my very wise mum had got him round to our flat to, put me straight and have a chat about joining the police. And he sold the idea to me, so much so that before he left, he pulled out the application forms out of his pocket, and I sat there and filled them in. And within a few short weeks, I was walking through the gates of Hendon Police Cadet School, to embark on what was a roller coaster.
And did you know much about the police? Did you know many police officers at the time? Like you said, you didn't have the traditional maybe route to being a police officer. When you joined, what was that like? And joining the police at a really young age as well, and you joined in Peckham in 1978. What was all that like as a really young guy?
Yeah, there was no history of policing in our family. The closest encounter I'd ever had with a cop was when I kicked the front door of an off license and got swiftly nabbed for it. Unfortunately, not charged. Such a dope. Thought I was a big hard man in my steel toe cap, Dr. Martens. Um, and yeah, it was all brand new to me, which so I was fascinated by it all. And there was so much discipline in the police cadets. They kind of knocked kids like me into shape, and they did a very effective job of it. And then when I got posted to Peckham as a police constable in 1978 in my big hat, um, Peckham was a very different world that I had no experience of. Multicultural, predominant Afro-Caribbean population, sort of second generation, the Windrush generation, their kids were growing up. And it was a hotbed of racism, not only outside of the police station, but sadly within it as well. It was largely policing was imposed upon minority communities because the white police force didn't understand the black population and were largely fearful of them. And some frankly ghastly things went on. And I, to my shame, became a vile, immature, little racist arse. And I had my sort of epiphany moment 3 years later at Brixton when the riots kicked off and Brixton burned. And I suddenly realized kind of, what a dope I was, because anybody who judges somebody on their color, creed, faith, race, sexuality, ability, you're a fool. Judge people on the people they are. Of course, some people are fools, and you can dislike them. That's absolutely fine. I'm not saying we live in some harmonious, naive kind of nirvana, because we don't. But anybody who judges someone purely and simply on those factors is a fool.
You spoke there in about 1981 in the Brixton riot, and maybe it being a bit of a turning point. You were involved. You were working around then, and 279 police officers were injured. It was sort of a chaotic couple of days in April of that year. What was your memories of it there? You spoke briefly on it.
Yeah, well, at the time, on the Friday afternoon, which was the start of the riots, me and some colleagues, we'd been working in what was called a divisional support unit. So it was a long wheel-based people carrier, a transit type thing, which they bundled a dozen of us proactive cops onto. And we would go to any kind of hotspot for any particular crime within our district. It was Friday afternoon. We'd had a long week, worked many, many hours. And as far as we were concerned, it was Poets' Day. Piss off early, tomorrow's Saturday. So we dropped a few of our colleagues off. And by the time the shout came up from Brixton for urgent assistance, There was only about 3 or 4 of us left on the van. And we were in Camberwell, which is the adjoining borough to Brixton. So we were there in a couple of minutes and we were almost first on scene. And the situation was just brewing. It was uncomfortable. There was a bit of a standoff. There had been some misunderstanding between the largely local black Afro-Caribbean population and, of course, the white police officers. The backdrop to all of this tension was that there had been Operation Swamp in the preceding weeks, and quite literally, Brixton police swamped the streets with as many officers as they could cobble together, both plainclothes and uniform, and if it moved, they stopped and searched it, just as a blanket thing, and that had really raised the tension in the area. So when a young black man gets stabbed on the Friday afternoon, a uniformed police officer was kneeling on his back, and that got misconstrued that he was this guy was being arrested. Actually, the police officer was kneeling on the stab wound to stop the blood coming out of it. But of course, you know, in the heat of the moment, and people don't ask questions, and there's an awful lot of underlying pre-existing tension, it got pretty tasty, pretty lively. And on that Friday night, we were all called off the streets back to Brixton Police Station, and some highly paid bright spark of a senior police officer said, right, go out onto the streets, patrol endlessly in a circle. So we were driving around in our van in a convoy of police vehicles, round and round and round. Don't get out the vehicles, don't do anything, don't stop anyone, don't search them, but just patrol endlessly. So what we became on that Friday night was a very big red rag to a very large and angry bull. And we could see the tension rising. We could just see it. You could feel it. You could see it. And we could see people walking across the street in front of us with a crate of empty milk bottles and disappearing down into a basement. And we knew what was going on. They were clearly going to make petrol bombs out of them. But could we get out and do anything? Could we stop anybody and talk to them and confiscate the milk bottles? No, just carry on patrolling. So the tension rose. The atmosphere got even more toxic. And the following day, quite literally, Brixton burned, and there were hundreds of people trying to kill me because of what I represented, because of the uniform I wore and the figure of oppression that I symbolised.
And you didn't really hang about then in uniform. You kind of moved on to maybe, if you like, you can answer it more than me, maybe the more glamorous side of policing, and maybe the stuff that gets moved when you move to sort of detective work and undercover work, and how did that really come about? Because you were still really young at the time, and it sort of branched off for you, and you got a little bit of a break, if you like.
I was a young man, and on that Sunday when I got home from the Brixton riots, I decided that was me, and wearing a uniform done. I was going to get out of that uniform as soon as I possibly could. Some of the officers from the CID had been making approaches to me and trying to convince me that that was a career path I should go down. And literally, I put in my application the following Monday when I went back to work to get out of uniform. And soon afterwards, I was on the crime squad serving my detective apprenticeship. I managed to pass my selection board. And in 1982, as a committed and hard-working cop, because I did work very hard, I was a brand new detective posted to Kensington in central London. And that was a very, very different area with a very, very different population to Peckham. I was now hobnobbing with some of the poshies, although it did have pockets of social deprivation, but it was very, very different. And I learned a whole new set of skills dealing with different crimes.
And the work is a little bit different to walk and the beat, if you like. And did it at this time you were obviously a big QPR fan, and did work and going to football matches, like you said, a little bit at the trying to police football games, did that ever kind of mix itself, if you like?
Right, I'll tell you a story. I had to stop watching Rangers for a little while. If we just rewind to when I was in uniform at Peckham, I still went every possible game I could, and I would juggle my duties as much as I could to ensure that I saw every Rangers game. We were playing Middlesbrough away, and we were night duty. So I finished night duty the previous night, went straight to the station, King's Cross, slept on the train, went to the game, and I'd figured it out that I could get a train back and pretty much be in time to go back on night duty without going, seeing my bed that day, but seeing my football team. Anyway, I come out of the game 5-10 minutes early because I've got to catch a particular train to get me back to London and get me back into night duty. And as I'm coming out of the game, a bunch of kids approached me, young men, and it was the typical, "You got the time, pal," right? And of course, why are they doing that? Because they want to hear your accent. And if you're a, soft Southern Cockney twat like they thought I was, you're going to get hiding. So what can I do? I can't do a Northeast accent. I'm rubbish at accents. I kind of knew what was coming. I'm a serving police officer at the time. I thought I'll take my chances. Told them what the time was, and it kicked off. Well, at the time I was boxing, so I was pretty fit, and I could throw a right-hander. So a couple of them got a lot more than they bargained for. But as it's all kicking off, and I'm not particularly winning. I mean, I did give a couple some lively reminders of who they've met, but I'm not particularly winning this encounter purely by sheer numbers. Up pulls a police van, and without asking any questions whatsoever, they throw us all in the back of the van. So I'm nicked, and I've got to be at night duty in about 5 hours' time. So we get taken to this police station. I explain the situation eventually when I get separated from these other people. And I pull my warrant card out, explain the situation. I said, "Look, this is not of my making. I've not committed any crimes here. I've just acted in self-defense. Can we all please swiftly move on? And can I get a lift back to the station to catch a train? Because I'm going to be late for night duty now." Long story short, I get back to Peckham late, right? They have to dispatch a car to come and pick me up because there's no trains. I get back to King's Cross so late. So they send a police car, pick me up. I go, "What happened to you?" And this, that, and the other. And word is it Peckham? Because of course they rang Peckham police station to check that I was who I said I was. Anyway, the following Monday, when I go in for late term, we stand there at our briefing, our daily kind of, team meeting and briefing. And it's like, "Bleksley, straight upstairs, see the chief superintendent," right? So this is 1979, 1980. I go into the chief superintendent's office, and quite frankly, he launches into me with a telling off the like of which I have never had before. All about, how I'm a police officer, I'm supposed to be a pillar of society and not some kind of football hooligan. And he doesn't really want to hear what I've got to say. And consequently, he said to me, and this is what, senior officers could do in those days. He said, "If I hit you to another Queen's Park Rangers football match, you will be sacked." Like, oh. Right. So that was me and Rangers done for a little while, until, of course, he left Peckham when I left Peckham. And then as soon as I got to Kensington, which was only a short hop to Shepherd's Bush anyway, of course, I was back into Rangers. So I had a short period when I quite literally could not go to Rangers for fear of losing my job.
Did they win?
Right, did we win? Middlesbrough away. It was the old Ayrton Park in those days. Escapes me. I'll have to have a look back over.
We'll check that, but I'm sure the result wasn't the top of your agenda when you're getting called into
It certainly wasn't. It certainly wasn't. And there are so many, literally hundreds and hundreds of Rangers games over the years that I've simply forgotten. One, because I'm old, and two, because the games were utterly forgettable, and number three, because we used to have a drink on the way to the away games.
Just a topic your chief superintendent said there, hooligan and hooliganism, and it was a huge part of not only European football but British football in the 70s, and like I've some of the names here and they're so synonymous, even now thinking about it, and some of the movies and documentaries that come out. So there was the Leeds Service Crew, the B Mob at Charlton, the Millwall Bushwhackers, and probably my most favorite, the Newcastle Gremlins. And these are groups of so-called football fans disguised as criminal thugs. And you would you have had much dealings with that when you had joined the police force? Was it a big issue at the time?
Birmingham City Zulus, West Ham and their ICF, the intercity firm, and many other clubs that had their firms. Yeah, I was there. I was there every Saturday watching it, and it was rampant and it was ugly. And consequently, it put quite a lot of people off going to football. The press used to love to give football hooligans a literary kicking whenever they could. And I was there. It was the days of when the ambition was to go to an away game and take the opposition's end. So no scarves, no identifying features, sneak into the opposition's end, and then a couple of minutes before kickoff, or as the teams came out, up go the arms, out goes the chant, and it all kicks off because you had to take the opposition's end. And I was at Loftus Road as a kid, down towards the front, no seating in those days, not at the ends, down towards the front, getting a good position. And literally that would happen, and you'd have any other, whatever opposition it was, trying to take your end, and it would kick off. And quite often, fans of the opposing sides who were getting a bit of a battering would roll literally down the terraces towards us kids who were sitting at the front. And if they were identified as being part of the Oppo, it wasn't pretty. And I don't condone any of it, of course, in any way, shape or form. But it was there. It was a plague on the game. It is still there. Anybody who thinks that football hooliganism has gone away is living in complete and utter denial, because I can tell you from my experiences, even of only doing a rare away game now, but doing every home game, it's still there. It hasn't gone away.
Yeah, and people go to football games nowadays, it seems, to take their anger out, and it's sort of that, almost, if you like, culture and acceptability of it. I have a few examples here of maybe hooliganism at its worst, maybe for younger people that have seen more of these incidents. For example, there's been, Chris Kirkland was in goal for Sheffield Wednesday at the time, I think, and one of the Leeds fans from behind the end came down and punched him in the face. And I remember I was actually watching that game, and all I remember is the coverage after the game was the two guys in the studio, whoever it was, and they just videoed the fan as he left to go back to his seat as if nothing had happened. Another example is Jack Grealish being attacked in the Second City Derby only a couple of years ago, and like, people might necessarily associate that with hooliganism, but that is sort of the culture that's around it. And to think a couple of years ago, one of at the time probably the Championship's best player and now in England international was attacked on the pitch and attacked from behind, and unbelievable circumstances. And now, credit to Jack Grealish, he went on, he scored the winner and he had the last laugh. But to think an incident like that happened only a couple of years ago, and there's been so much talk that hooliganism has sort of died down, but it's still very much there.
No, it hasn't. The police have got much, much better at policing it and controlling it. And now, certainly at Rangers, there is a permanent police team, attached to Rangers, and they know the fans and they travel away with them. Good job, eh? Imagine having that job. Imagine if it was your team and you're a uniformed police officer. So you travel to every away game and get paid for it and watch the home games for nothing. Blimey, it's enough to make me get a warrant card again. But, they're much, much better at it. And when we come out of our grounds, the Kai and Prince Foundation Stadium, when we come out after a game, there are certain matches where it's going to get a bit lively. And you know who those teams are because they will bring a little crew with them, and some of them will try and have a tear up. But the police are much better at policing it. We come out the ground and there will be a line of officers and they will direct the away fans and separate them from the home fans. But of course, it still kicks off. Football essentially is a tribal sport. And so there is still aggravation from time to time, but fortunately, nowhere near at the levels of the 1970s. I'm very glad to say.
And also, for people that don't know, there was a ban on English clubs entering UEFA competitions in 1985. It was actually posed as an indefinite ban. It got later stopped in 1990, and that was due to the Heysel Stadium disaster. And it came, Margaret Thatcher, who was PM at the time, she came out and said, we have to clean up at home before we were allowed to go overseas. Do you have any memories of those kind of incidents, and, you know, this idea of English fans going abroad to major tournaments, and some of the aggro that calls from it? And I'm trying to stay away from the idea that, you know, these are football fans. These are the criminal thugs who looted and, you know, stole from local businesses wherever they went. And that's sort of the idea that, you know, these aren't football fans, they're thugs.
Yeah, they're thugs who attach themselves to a football team. And yes, of course, Highsaw, I remember that tragedy only too well. Hillsborough, me and my mate, who I still go with, were sitting next to each other at Rangers watching a dreadful, turgid 0-0 home draw with Middlesbrough, I think, if I remember rightly. Blooming Middlesbrough again. Anyway, yeah, there we were sitting there. Mark, my mate, always carried a little portable radio in those days. You know, there was no mobile phones and internet. And so you would carry a little portable radio to hear the other football results coming in. And Mark suddenly gives me a nudge and says, somebody's died at Hillsborough. Mm. And I've gone, oh, crikey. Mm. And then he said, another person's died. And another person's died. Mm. And there was kind of like a hush went round the ground because there were many people listening to their portable radios. And I turned around to Mark, bearing in mind at the time, I'm a serving police officer. I've been on both ends of policing football, subjected to it, and I did police a few football matches, but I was, you know, that wasn't really very good for me. During my ban from going to QPR, I policed a few football matches at Crystal Paralysis, and you know, it wasn't good because I'd be there watching two teams that I didn't like, invariably with supporters of teams that I didn't like, so I wasn't the most engaging kind of copper. And forgive me, but if anybody gave me half an excuse to sling them out of the ground, I did. But anyway, so I did very few games, not very good at policing football. Anyway, back to the tragedy of Hillsborough. So, you know, I knew football policing only too well. And I turned around to Mark and I said, this is down to the police. This is fundamentally down to the police. I said, because, you know, it's the police's job to keep people safe at football matches. And if people are dying, it's down to the police. That is a view that I still hold extremely strongly to this day. And the way that the establishment has tried to hide and mask the truth and not accept any responsibility for what happened that day is frankly shameful. And of course, I've spent a lot of time in Liverpool recently with regards to my hunt for Kevin Parle, and perhaps we'll talk about that later. And I have nothing but admiration and respect for people who for decades have tried to establish the truth about how their loved ones lost their lives. And let's remember at Hillsborough then, and many, many other grounds, we were caged like animals, because that's what so many people, particularly I should imagine Margaret Thatcher, thought we were. You know, and let's remember, football has become the phenomenon that it, and the money-making machine that it is today, but it wasn't that back in the day. Back in the day, if you went to a party and you joined company of people that weren't football fans, and you said you were a football fan, that would kill the conversation. You would automatically be regarded as a thug, a hooligan, and somebody that, quite frankly, people didn't want to talk about. The middle classes only really discovered football when Gaza cried at the World Cup in 1990. That is when the middle classes found football, and they went and bought their replica shirts and all that kind of other plastic activity that plastic pretend supporters do. That's when it happened, in my opinion. Gaza cried, the middle classes found football.
And maybe just going back onto Hillsborough, and, you know, that the sort of the spin-off that came from it, you know, this the police labeling it as drunkenness or hooliganism. And, you know, there was the Taylor report that, you know, put a lot of the blame at the South Yorkshire Police. There was obviously David Duckenfield, but, you know, still, you know, what is it, 30 years on, just over 30 years on, the emotions are still so raw for Liverpool fans. The justice for the 96 campaign still is running, you know, and it seems like, you know, what was the worst disaster in British sport in history, you know, it still seems to, that little sense of, whatever they could have got out of it, that little bit of justice, or that little sense of something, that hope, with hope in your heart, as You'll Never Walk Alone goes. It just seems that, they never quite got that justice.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is because the establishment, the upper classes, the middle classes, looks down their noses at football fans. Look what, and I'm not going to name that newspaper, but look at the front pages of a particular rag. Look what they ran. Within hours, they are apportioning blame without knowing any of the facts. They take as gospel what the police tell them, because they, in the early hours, were conveniently pumping out that it was all their fault. It was all the fault of the supporters. Nothing to do with people who did or didn't open gates. Nothing to do with anybody that herded people in a worse environment than you would herd cattle, who are then fenced in, caged in, and cannot escape and consequently perish. I mean, it was the establishment at its very most untrustworthy worst, and it still isn't over. The story still has legs to run, and it will, because there are some quite frankly brilliant people on Merseyside and beyond who rightly will not let it go, and nor should they.
And yeah, and you do feel that sense, even like when you see photos of campaigns in the past, or that connection that Everton have, and there's that unbelievably famous image of a Liverpool and Everton mascot Liverpool wearing number 9 and the Everton wearing 6, and that connection between Liverpool and Everton and Merseyside is just so special. And you do think that that connection is born out of the tragedy that was Hillsborough. And maybe moving on to something more closer to home for our...
Just forgive me one moment, and yeah. I'm not being discourteous by looking away from you.
No
But
problem.
I tidied up my office about a month ago, and I suspect I must have tidied it into a box for safekeeping in the loft. But I had that fundraising single with those two kids in the Liverpool and Everton shirts. I bought that single on a CD, and I must have put it up in the loft as a safekeeping. It's a campaign that I keep a very close watching eye upon, because I was a football supporter. On another day, at another game, that could have been me, and it was ghastly. And what the establishment did to the families, in the aftermath of that is a deep stain upon the contemporary history of our nation.
And you think every time you hear "You'll Never Walk Alone" being sung at Anfield, there's always that connection to the 96 that lost their lives at the Hillsborough disaster. And look, moving on to a different issue, and 6 years on from Hillsborough, in 95, Ireland hosted England in a friendly at the old Lansdowne Road, and it was a year before England were due to host. Well, England hosted Euro 96, and it was a friendly between Terry Venable's England and the World Cup winner for England, that was Jack Charlton, was the Ireland manager at the time, and he was being called Judas and all, and it was sort of an all merciful shame of a night, really, and that happened at Lansdowne Road. Do you have any memories of that? The match being called off after 25 or 30 minutes?
Well, first of all, before I get on to talk about the thugs that scuppered the game, I just have to mention Jack Charlton. And I felt his loss only just a few weeks ago, very, very deeply. He'd been a constant, in my life in so many ways. Revered, of course, because he was a World Cup winner. And I accept I don't remember that day, that game. But what he then went on to do, as a towering centre half for dirty Leeds, who, I think we all begrudgingly respected because they were such a fine team under Don Revie. And I reckon I can probably name most of that side. But an astonishing, wonderful player. Tremendous manager. Blimey, Middlesbrough comes to mind again. I think he got Middlesbrough promoted as well, didn't he? And then what he did for the Irish side, I mean, was just remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. I know he said some things in later life that some people might construe as being a bit clumsy and all that stuff, and so be it. But But I remember him fondly. He gave me a lot of really terrific memories, and we all had a very soft spot for that Ray Houghton team, you know, with all of the Steve Stauntons, wasn't it? And you know, all the guys in that side that did so brilliantly at the World Cup under Jack's stewardship. So may Jack Charlton rest in peace, bless him.
Absolutely, and I think it was only when his loss was announced in the Irish media that people started to think back on not only the legacy of the football team and what he did in making Ireland reach those major tournaments, the World Cups, the Euros, but I think it was the attitude that he changed in Irish society, that, you know, the Irish people, the Irish mantra, if you like, is we were good enough, and we were able to dominate on the world stage, if you like. And I think a lot of, you know, social economical depression was around that time, and sort of gave the whole country a lift. And when you hear the passing and you see the public outcry in England because of the World Cup winner, and, you know, his connection with his brother Bobby and everything, I mean, it was just such a sad passing. And on that night, you sort of saw the best of Jack Charlton. He kind of stood up to what had happened. He was very vocal in the press about, you know, it being a real shame that night in 95 at Lansdowne.
Yeah. A towering man in so many regards. Yeah, and it was kind of like a victory for thuggery that evening, unfortunately. The police, once again, have got to look themselves in the mirror, because it's their job. It's their job. And I know football clubs don't like to pay police officers to be inside the stadium, because then they do have to pick up the bill. Whereas if they're outside the stadium, they don't pick up the bill, you know. And yeah, just unfortunately a victory for the ugliness of thuggery. And I'm glad, but lessons have been learned. Stadiums have been rebuilt, and we move on. And I have no qualms about taking my kids to football. I know I can see when aggravation is kicking off, or when it's brewing, you know, because I've been going to football all my life. And I've been taking my three sons since they were nippers, and I mean real nippers, since they could barely, well, just about walk and talk. I've been taking them to watch Rangers. And I will. And I've taken my wife to football on very, very rare occasions, I hasten to add. And I've taken my mum to football on very, very rare occasions. But yeah, I would have no qualms about taking anybody to football now. If you know what you're doing and you know where the aggravation may stem, and if you're not looking for it, you know, then it's a safe environment to go and enjoy the beautiful game.
And moving on, a year after that was Euro 96, and a lot of people speak about, you know, England and you know, the hurt of maybe not winning it. But do you have any memories of that summer of football that is so defined in English football? You know, this idea that football was coming home. Have you any memories of that?
Yeah, I do. You know, the great tune, that was a lot of fun, wasn't it? Old Daddy and Skinner and the Lightning Seeds. That was, you know, they reprieved that, didn't they, not so long ago? Yeah, terrific tune. And of course, Gazza with that goal. I mean, wow. I mean, just an indelible memory. Absolutely indelible memory, together with the celebration, of course. Yeah, great tournament. But as per usual, England didn't win it. End of. You know, and I have, quite frankly, watched so many dire England teams over the years that yeah, it's average. I've always been club before country, to be honest with you. When it comes to supporting, you know, I will do anything to watch Rangers, and never want to miss a game if I can possibly help it. England, take it or leave it, to be perfectly frank with you. I don't know whether that sounds distinctly unpatriotic of me. You know, I'll watch it. Clearly, I'll watch it. And I've got a mate down a cricket club that does England home and away. Cool. I'd like to be a pound note behind him if he could afford to do England home and away. Crikey.
He's seen some stuff as well. Yeah,
absolutely. He really has. And fair play to him. You know, that's his passion. That's what he does. I can't believe it. I mean, I don't earn as much in money as he earns in air miles, or did. And good luck to him. But yeah, that's for me. It's always the love of my club will always outstrip the love of my country's team.
You talked about Gaza there. Now, there's another player that was sort of, vilified in the media, if you like. And something I want to get touched on is the campaign that Marcus Rashford is doing at the moment. Now, for those that don't know, he's a huge advocate of getting free meals to school children, to end child poverty, to end this idea of children going hungry. And even when you see this person who is, you know, at the peak of his powers football-y, he's just scored the winner in the Champions League game away to Paris. You know, he's the starting striker for Manchester United, and yet this person is doing so much good, and you can't say he's not. That even stuff in the media and stuff on, I know Twitter is a completely different platform, but even you see some of the stuff around Marcus Rashford, you do wonder, you know, is this another Paul Gascoigne, if you like, because Marcus Rashford is doing unbelievably work both on and off the pitch.
Build them up to bring them down.
Mm.
It's what the media does, doesn't it? It builds people up, makes them heroes, and then revels when they discover their shortcomings and everything comes crashing down around them. It's 2020, of course it is. I hope that Marcus Rashford has a very shrewd team around him, and I'm sure he must have. He appears to me to be a mighty fine young man, let alone a very, very good footballer. But there will be snakes out there. The vultures will be circling for Marcus, if I can sound all familiar and say that, use that, you know, his first name. I've never met him, of course. The vultures will be circling, those journalistic vultures looking for his first mistake. And they will latch onto it like you will not believe and do a complete and utter hatchet job on him. So Marcus appears to me to be very level-headed, very sensible, mature beyond his years. I just hope that those around him ensure that such a situation cannot arise, to be perfectly honest with you. When the world starts turning properly again, I'm sure Marcus will enjoy an evening out with his friends and probably want to go to a club. Why not? He's a young man. It's what young people do. I'm old and I still like a night at a club. You know, but I just hope that he quite literally has a team with him. So whereby if he goes to a nightclub, for example, some wise, seasoned, calm but firm bodyguards, essentially close protection operatives, go with him. You know, he can afford to pay them, and that they can have the ability to look round the corner, to anticipate trouble if it's coming and stop it. It's always bemused me why footballers do not actually employ more people. I know some do, because I know people in the industry, but why other highly paid sports stars and prominent people do not employ sensible, mature, firm and polite, worldly wise security staff so that they can enjoy their evening with their friends, not be cut off from the public. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying, you know, hire the VIP area and never get in touch with, you know, your people. You know, I get that. People want to do that, and it's a lovely thing because most of the public are wonderful and engage beautifully with prominent people. I know that from my Z-list status. I've had people in the street come up and meet me and greet me, and they've been an absolute joy, and I've always found time for them, without exception. But when you're that prominent, and you're Marcus Rashford, or you're Gaza, or you're whoever you might be, there will always be some clown wanting to take a pop at you, have a go at you, and cause you some aggravation. So yeah, I've long questioned why you know, of course you can hire all the knuckle dragging, bone-headed bodyguards in the world that you want, but people with a bit of life experience who can talk to people are a rather different entity. And I've often wondered why prominent people don't employ such operatives that can save them aggravation.
Well, I suppose Marcus Rashford is probably one of the best stories to come out of this year, 2020. But just to look back on something as well, and, you know, people like even my age, I vividly remember the London Olympics of 2012, the Super Saturday that came with it, and, you know, everything that came with the Olympics, and it left an indelible mark on people. You would have experienced, you know, previous Olympics to 2012. Does 2012 rank as, you know, one of your most favourite?
It was absolutely wonderful. My two youngest boys were 10 and 11, So my wife and the boys, we got tickets for certain events. None of your flagship events, you know what I mean? We went into ballots and all that stuff, but we got tickets for race walking,
Mm.
and we went to the race walk because I used to do that in the police,
Yeah,
and I was half decent at it.
and an Irishman got fourth and later got bronze, Rob Heffernan from Cork. So I think a lot of people will actually remember that. And the walk around some of London's most famous attractions as well. It was special.
It was brilliant. It was wonderful. We got tickets to go to the stadium for a day of the Paralympics,
Mm.
which was absolutely wonderful. Really, really wonderful. And I went to the final of the football at Wembley, which was terrific.
Mm.
So we had some indelible memories. And the Paralympics, the guy, please forgive me, I've forgotten his name. He won the 200 meters for Great Britain. And as he came off the bend, he was about fifth or sixth, and I thought all his chances were over. But as he hit the straight, he was like greased lightning, and won the 200 meters, and that was wonderful. And huge apologies to you, sir, for not remembering your name. Your name, that is shameful of me. But yeah, it was just wonderful. The facilities were brilliant. The action was gripping. The atmosphere was phenomenal. It felt like there was a common purpose for everybody to go out and enjoy themselves. And of course, there were no homeless people on the streets of London.
Mm.
Now, isn't that a thing? When you have the Olympics coming to our capital city, suddenly the resources can be found to clear all the unfortunate homeless from the streets. And they're now back in record numbers. Why can't we do that all the time for everyone?
Just to go back, it was Richard Whitehead who won the.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Whitehead, profound apologies if you happen to be listening or watching. Please, I beg your forgiveness. But yeah, all the homeless people off the streets. Funny that, isn't it, for the Olympics?
And it does seem when European Championships and World Cups come to places, South Africa being a bit of an example of that, where the country gets a glistening light on them. Everyone looks at the full stadiums, the atmosphere. There's always a great carnival festival vibe at those events, and then when the cameras go and the fans go and things get built down again, and all of a sudden you're not back to square one, if you like. But is that something that you had noticed in London, places in and around the Olympic Stadium and places that hosted events where the spotlight was shined on that part of London, and all of a sudden when a month or two after the Paralympics and everything's gone and it sort of reverts back to normal?
When the show leaves town, eh?
Yeah.
When it all pulls out of town, then but I mean the legacy of the Olympics in some ways is a strong one. There were some great facilities built which are continually being used, and that's a great thing. It was a part of East London that needed regeneration. The park is great. My youngest son regularly runs a 10K round there on a Saturday morning, and we go there and we watch it and we enjoy it, and the facilities are still lovely and well maintained. I've got a lot of West Ham supporters in my life, and they have my utmost sympathy, because I kid you not, and I don't want to sound like too much of a smart ass here, but please forgive me. I tell you, when we were sitting there with my boys, right, they're 10 and 11, but they've already been going to Rangers for 6 or 7 years. So they've watched a lot of football for their tender ages. We sat there in that stadium watching the Paralympics going, this is a brilliant athletic stadium, absolutely brilliant, but it would be a rubbish football stadium. And we discussed it and we all agreed you wouldn't want to watch football there. So I really kind of feel sorry for my West Ham supporting friends, of which I have quite a few, who have to suffer that as a home ground in a largely sort of sterilised atmosphere compared to what was the lovely old Boleyn ground, Upton Park, with all the lovely boozers near it. And, I've been going to Upton Park for years with my West Ham mates, and we used to go into a West Ham pub before a West Ham Rangers game and have a drink and have a laugh and pull each other's leg and all of that. And I feel for them, because I don't think the London Stadium is very much a tool really when it comes to a place to watch football.
And it was funny at the time when West Ham were going for it, Tottenham put in a bid, and you think of everything that's happened now with the Tottenham Stadium. If Tottenham had won that, they would have moved across the city. Everyone knows that. But I think the idea of West Ham being back at the Boleyn ground. There was always something special about Upton Park when you saw those games. And I think maybe even for the West Ham fans, it was only that last game against Manchester United that really showed that, they were going to miss it. And I think they got sold, if you like, a false dream. And that might be just the nature of football. You want more fans in the ground, more revenue, more signings and all. But I think that West Ham themselves, and I think the Premier League, if you like, sort of lost something by Upton Park being knocked to the ground.
Well, that whole Gold, Sullivan, Brady out campaign really has some legs. They are extremely unpopular. I would imagine that West Ham's, quite frankly, wonderful performances on the pitch recently might have dulled some of that. I don't know. I really don't know. I haven't been across it recently. But yeah, I think one of the best things that ever happened at Tottenham, in retrospect, is the fact that they didn't win that bid. Because I've got a Tottenham supporting mate who's a season ticket holder. And of course, he only went just a handful of times before lockdown was imposed. But he absolutely loves that new stadium and says it is truly amazing. And he's promised to take me there one day. I look forward to that.
And the best thing is it's, backed onto the old White Hart Lanes. The memories of going to the rituals of the same pub, the same bus stop, all that sort of thing reigns true. Look, Peter, you've been amazing with your time. And I really want to get onto this topic now because you are the man that's hunting Kevin Parle. When you hear the name Kevin Parle, and you might just expect or tell the listener who mightn't necessarily know about this guy, what does he mean to you at the moment? Is it that steely determination I'm going to catch him?
Well, thank you for asking this question and bringing me on to the subject of Kevin Parle, because it is now my life's work to find this man. If we could just rewind to February of 2019, I left a TV show called Hunted. I'd left the show and I was deciding what my next major project would be. And my publishers had said, yes, you can write another book if you get the right subject material. And I was thinking, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, despite the fact that, I've written plays for BBC Radio 4 and I've written books and all of that, I am best known for being that bloke who used to hunt pretend fugitives on the telly in an entertainment show.
That's how I knew you originally.
Yes, thank you. And I accept that. And I loved being a part of the show, and it was great. And I've got wonderful memories, and it was lovely to entertain so many people, or be a part of entertaining so many people. So I'm deciding what my next major project will be. I'd written about unsolved murders with my previous couple of books, all available on Amazon, people. And I thought, right, now let's combine my skill set, my experience, my contacts, what I'm known for, and now go and hunt a real fugitive. And believe you me, they do not come any more wanted than 6'6", broadly built, Liverpudlian, Kevin Parle.
His image is appearing on the YouTube video, but we're going to post all our stuff on social media. We're going to link everything in the description about Kevin Parle. Just for a little bit of context, he's a Liverpudlian, as you said, but he's wanted in connection with a double murder, with two separate murders. One, I think, I don't think either is, even better than the other. They're both horrendous. One was a 16-year-old Liam Kelly in 2004. Maybe you might start us off by talking about Liam, and then there's also the 22-year-old mum of three, Lucy Hargreaves, in 2005, and this man is wanted in connection with both of them. Maybe just tell us a little bit about Liam Kelly, because at 16, it's horrendous, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm going to unashamedly reinforce that fact, even though you've mentioned it twice. Liam was 16. He was a kid, a child. And of course, I've been hunting Parle for 18 months now. I've spent many, many weeks in Liverpool and many other places as well. And I've spoken to people that knew Liam, and none of them have described him to me as being a model student. Well, nor was I when I was 16. But Liam was blasted to death with a shotgun and consequently denied the right to grow, to mature, to enter manhood, to find a partner, to have a family to provide for by doing a legitimate day's work. Denied all of that because he was gunned down in the street. Now, 3 people have appeared in court in connection with Liam's murder. One got a life sentence for murder, but the court was told that Kevin Parle pulled the trigger. Kevin Parle is unconvicted, right? Let me just say that. He's not convicted of either crime. He is wanted for both of these ghastly murders, and I need to reinforce that. But the court was told Parle pulled the trigger. One other person convicted of murder, one person convicted of assisting Parle by burning clothing and disposing of phones, and another person convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice by providing a false alibi statement for Parle, which is actually what led or forced the police into bailing Parle, because he was nicked in the early stages of the inquiry. So they were forced into bailing him while they checked out that false alibi. And of course, Parle was never to be seen again. Kevin Parle must be found. He will be found. Now, the second murder, if I may, we fast forward from June of 2004, Liam's murder, to August of 2005. A 22-year-old mother of 3 young children called Lucy Hargreaves is on her sofa at home watching the television under a blanket. 3 men force their way into her house and she is blasted to death with a shotgun. A 22-year-old young woman, entirely innocent, unconnected to any criminality. Unfortunately, her life partner, a man called Gary Campbell, who was upstairs with their youngest child in bed, he had been involved in a fatal car accident some 12 years earlier where a 4-year-old child had been killed. And a court was told that the motive for the attack was revenge on Gary Campbell, but that has never been proven. Let me make it clear. Parle, once again, very much wanted for that crime. I've met many people that knew Lucy, neighbours and others, and they tell me that she was as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside. The fact that Kevin Parle remains on the run for both of these ghastly crimes is in itself a travesty. He needs to be found, arrested, and put before a court of law so he can answer the allegations that are made against him. That's what my life is dedicated to. We have a BBC podcast, which has proved to be very popular.
Very popular, yeah.
But yeah, over 2.5 million downloads and climbing every day. It's called Manhunt, Finding Kevin Parle. It's on the BBC Sounds platform and many others, I understand it. It's won an award, proved very popular. Please have a listen to it. And my book was published last month. My book is called Manhunt, but it is a very different vehicle from the podcast. Don't think if you listen to the podcast, the book has nothing for you. As some of the reviews that have been posted online will bear out, they're different things, and you can get an awful lot from the book that you don't get from the podcast, and vice versa. There is a website which is currently selling Manhunt, the book, for only £4. And if you would be kind enough to post that link, it's called works.co.uk. You can pick it up for only £4, which is quite frankly astonishing. But you know, as a writer, why would I publicise my books at the cheapest possible website? Well, this is about Parle, not profit.
Yeah.
And the more we spread the word, the more people become aware of Parle and the crimes he's wanted for, the more we shrink the world. And it is my ambition to squeeze the globe so tightly that eventually his 6'6" head pops up somewhere and law enforcement can slap the handcuffs on.
And like you said, you're finding this man to put him before court and to bring justice to Liam and Lucy, but you've got pretty close and you feel like you're onto something. There's been a couple of different incidents. Maybe you might talk on your trip to Spain, but maybe first the stuff in and around your house and your bedroom, and sort of once you've focused your mind on Kevin Parle, you believe he's alive because of some of these things that have happened.
He is alive. I'm telling you, he's alive. Don't believe the convenient urban myth that some people propagate about him being dead, chopped into bits and slung in the Mediterranean. That is not the case. He is alive. The last 18 months while I've been hunting him have been quite remarkable. I've been on one heck of a journey which of course I've written and broadcasted about. Some people want to prevent me, stop me, frighten me, intimidate me, to stop me doing what I'm doing. Why? Why would they do that, I wonder? Because they've got Kevin Parle's best interests at heart, because they're a bit concerned, because they know that I'm never going to give up, and because they know he's very much alive. Yes, I suspect that is probably their motives. That's why they've posted pictures of my house online on social media. In fact, on one occasion, they posted a picture of my house together with an accurate description of the bedroom that I sleep in. Well done, Sherlock, a career best bit of detective work. You're not going to put me off. You're not going to stop me. You're not going to detract me. You're not going to frighten or intimidate me into giving up hunting Kevin Parle. He must be found, and he will be found.
Exactly, and like you said, he will be found, and it's sort of you if you like, you put your almost your reputation, if you like, on the line in order to stop Kevin Parle. And like you said, it's Parle, not profit. So we urge everyone to really have a look at this campaign. We'll post everything in our episode description. It'll be up on our social media, and maybe just to get a sense of, you know, sort of things about him. He's distinctively tall. You've also had that encounter in Spain where they described him as, Big Kev, I think it was. Do you want to just
tall Kevin? Yeah,
tall Kevin. Do you want to discuss that?
Yeah, a number of very courageous people have come forward and told me what they know, and people continue to do that. And I would urge you, if you have information about Kevin Parle, and I don't mind if it's dated stuff, going back, you know, we've gone back as far as his primary school years and all of that, because past behaviour is often an indicator of future behaviour. So however dated the information may be, please ring me. I could not be more contactable. I'm on I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn as Peter Bleksley. Unusual spelling of my name, Bleksley. I've got a phone that never leaves my side. Can I give that number, please?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, 07908 617 694. Could not be more contactable. Website, peterbleksley.com. You know, and email addresses and all of that, they're all out there. I'm so contactable. Let me tell you this. The people that are harbouring and funding Kevin Parle form part of a global network of criminality. And if I were to say this, and forgive me, I'm not being coy, and I'm not trying to be smart or disrespectful to your listeners and your viewers, far from it, because I would urge them to help me just by being my eyes and ears and reading and hearing about Parle, raising awareness. Let me say this. I am extremely happy to be broadcasting on your podcast, and thank you once again, to your audience. Think of the geography of where your audience is largely based. I'm very happy to be reaching your audience. And I would urge people to please, you know, listen, read about Parle, and tell me what you know. We all know that organised crime have global links. We all know that. The world is a lot smaller. Criminality operates very differently to how it did back in my day. But yeah, I've been to many places, Liverpool numerous times, Manchester, Warrington, Spain, a couple of places that I can't tell you at the moment, all in my hunt for Parle. And when we were in Spain, we had a very interesting experience. I'd been told by people that he frequents a cannabis club. Now in Spain, there are these cannabis clubs or cannabis associations. You pay a membership fee, anything from 20 to 100 euros, show some photographic ID and proof that you are a local resident, and you can join one of these clubs, and you can go there and smoke cannabis in the club. You can't buy it, so it can't be dealt in there or anything like that, but you can go and smoke weed if that's your thing. We went to this club that had been identified to us, and it was closed for building work, according to a sign on a piece of A4 on the front door. And as me and Mark, my beloved podcast editor, were standing by the door, Mark with his microphone ready to talk to me about what my thoughts and feelings were about this place and it being closed, two young men popped out of the door, literally took us by surprise. Mediterranean looking. We had a conversation with them, and they asked what we were doing. I said I was looking for Kevin, and they went, "Oh, tall Kevin." At which point I was extremely interested, as you can imagine. Bearing in mind, Parle is 6'6". I said, "Oh yeah, tall Kevin, yeah." And they said, "What do you want to talk to him about?" Right. It was at this point that I proved that I am completely and utterly gone at the game, unfortunately, because I delved into my rucksack. I've got flyers, and I'm sure you'll post links to the flyers on your website that never leave me. I've always got them, and I pulled out a flyer which has 2 pictures of Kevin Parle on them. They've been computer enhanced by John Moores University in Liverpool to give a guesstimate as what he looks like in 2016. And believe you me, people that have seen him said they're accurate. You know, so he's very similar to these. As I pulled the flyer out, these images were clearly developed from a police mugshot. So they look essentially what they are, a police mugshot. And all of a sudden it's gone from, "Oh yeah, tall Kevin, what would you like to talk about?" They've suddenly changed tack and they've gone, "Oh, excuse me, let me just stop there." They've gone, no, no. No, the Kevin we're talking about is 75. Yeah, really? Righto. Well, you can hear that exchange. It's in the podcast in episode 8, I think, and draw your own conclusions. But I've played that clip to people, you know, to professors of criminology, for example, you know, esteemed, clever people, and they have roundly all just gone, lying. They're lying. They were clearly talking about Parle when they saw the photos that are obviously developed from police mugshots. They changed their mind. Can we just pause there? Yeah. So please listen to the podcast. Read the book if you can, because this hunt for Kevin Parle is not about me, and it's not about Kevin Parle really. It's about Liam and Lucy and trying to secure some justice for the victims, because really this is about truth over lies. This is about right over wrong, and this is about justice, because as we've discussed, for example, with Hillsborough and many other situations, countless situations that people find themselves in, if there is no justice, there is frustration, there's a sour taste, there's anger. We need to have justice. A sense of justice, I believe, is central to our very core being and well-being. And I think that Kevin Parle needs to stand in a court and answer the allegations made against him. It's as simple as that.
And I think we must stress that this is a job undertaken by you. You know, you've got a lot of expenses that have been occurring. You really want this man in connection with the 2 murders, and I'll just reiterate them. It's 16-year-old Liam Kelly in 2004, and it's 22-year-old mum of 3 Lucy Hargreaves in 2005. And this man is wanted in connection with both of them. And I think that the scary thing to look at is now Liam Kelly would be in his 30s and Lucy Hargreaves, again, also in her 30s, living their lives to their full. And they were taken, believed to be in this man who has a connection with both murders and needs to appear before court. So I think you're absolutely spot on, and we urge everyone to click all the links in our description, buy the book, tell your friend about the podcast, to just listen to Peter's story on trying to find Kevin Parle, because at the end of the day, it's Parle, not profit.
Yeah, buy the book, read it, pass it on, please. You know, I put in the book how much money I had earned, in inverted commas, in connection to my hunt with Parle, and thus far, I have not put 1 carrot on our dining room table. Any money I have earned or been paid for Parle, either in connection with the podcast, has all been spent on my hunt for him. It's an expensive business. We've been on planes, trains, and automobiles, and stayed in hotels for weeks. And when you're on the road, you've got to buy every coffee, every Coke, every sandwich, every meal. It's a really expensive business. But I'm not asking for sympathy here. This is not, you know, I'm not playing poverty, because my wife has been sensible over the years with whatever we've earned. But this is not about profit. This is about the victims and finding Kevin Parle. So thank you in advance, everybody. I really, really appreciate it. And even if you just have thoughts or theories and you want to discuss it, I make a point of finding time to respond to anybody who reaches out and connects with me. So I will do that. I assure you.
And I can say from my own experience, you're very easy to contact, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. There's the phone number, which we'll link. And if anyone in Ireland is calling it, don't forget you've to put in the 44 and drop the O. So look, we've had a brilliant chat, Peter, and we wish you all the best with that hunt for Kevin Parle. And you know, in the era of COVID, it makes everything that little bit harder, but you're still working as hard as possible. And, you know, hopefully one day we might, in a COVID-free world, get you over here to Dublin or try and really push the search for this guy. And how are you finding it at the moment? Just a little brief thing on lockdown, and you know, you're working from home a lot and you can't really do the bulk and the heavy loading, if you like, of the traveling around to places.
Yeah, it's the travelling that I can't do, and that is, of course, deeply, deeply frustrating, and very much works to the advantage of Kevin Parle.
Yeah.
But we live in the age of the digital detective, don't we? The desktop detective, whatever you want to call them. And there is so much that can be done from the confines of my office, and that is still happening. And that doesn't stop people. The fact that we're locked down, you know, doesn't stop people coming forward and speaking to me. And I'm learning more and more and more about Kevin Parle, all of which we will put into the public domain when it is safe to do so and it is suitable to do so. So please keep it coming. Lockdown, yeah. The first 11 weeks, I was writing the book. You know, I'd got a bit behind with it, so I got my head down, wrote the book. I was very fortunate in that regard, as well as continuing my hunt from my desktop for him. And then, as we kind of came out of that and restrictions got lifted, we had about half a cricket season or so. And for my mental health, sitting on the boundary with a cool box, with a lovely picnic, watching cricket, you know, predominantly my son playing cricket. He's now, you know, he's nearly 18. Was just a joyous thing. Because while you're watching cricket, apart from people hand sanitizing every 6 overs, you think the world is turning normally. It just transports you to a beautiful place. So yeah, how deeply indebted I am to sport, of course.
Exactly. And it's only now when you look at the sport, and even when we were doing our review show on Monday, and you know, you don't put in every topic because there's so much sport, and you wonder how we survived the original lockdown without live sport. You know, you've got the rugby, you've got horse racing, you've golf, you've football. In Ireland, we've Gaelic games, which is so important to the fabric of our society. And you really appreciate sport at this time to give people, I suppose, to add something to the national conversation.
And the national identity. It's so important for us, isn't it? You know, and fair play to the broadcasters and the authorities. Now, you know why the authorities were so desperate to get sport back on the TV as quickly as they could, because it keeps people indoors.
Yeah.
And I know that government ministers were briefing the sporting bodies and saying, get the sport on the telly. Whatever it takes, we will help you get it on the telly, because it keeps people in their homes. And that's great. And I was contacted by a Sky Sports exec the other week who wanted to connect with me on LinkedIn, and we had a chat, you know, and I said, yeah, I know these are paid for subscription services, and I know it's a travesty that not everybody can afford them. And I understand how lucky I am to be able to pay that subscription and devour that sport when time allows. But yeah, sport has been such a major part of my life and always will be. And it's a thing I deeply love. Unfortunately, my ambition has always outstripped my ability, no matter what sport I play. You know, as a footballer, my second touch was always a free kick or a throw-in. Yeah, you've heard about my horizontal nickname as a boxer, you know, and a limited ability cricketer. But it didn't stop me loving those sports and playing the best I possibly could.
I love that nickname. That's brilliant. But it also reminds me of me, because I'm not the best at sport, but I love it. And you still have that infectious. And we spoke to an Irish politician, a prominent Irish politician the other day, and he, Aidan O'Riordan from the Labour Party, and he had the exact same idea that necessarily he wasn't as good at when he was younger at sport, but he still had those memories. And we might touch on a few of those memories in the quick fire, which we do. And it's, you know, as short or as long an answer as possible. And if it brings back any memories, feel free to discuss it. And we might start with the best player you've ever seen play for QPR.
No, I'm torn. I'm torn between two.
Okay.
Um, Rodney Marsh,
Hmm.
my first blue and white hooped hero, and Stan Bowles. Two utterly magical, breathtaking, astonishing footballers. Truly, truly brilliant. And with all due respect to all the other wonderful players that I've had the great joy of watching, I'm torn between Rodney and Stan. So am I allowed to be torn? Can I sit on the fence?
Yeah, we'll let you. You've been so open with your time. A lot of people in their head will be going someone like Adel Torat, who they've seen play in the Premier League, the skills he had. Another question on QPR. There's a couple on them. Who's the favourite manager, or the best time as a QPR fan in terms of managerial? Because they've had a whole host of managers down the line. You think of the likes of Ian Holloway, Harry Redknapp, people like that. And who'd be your favourite, or your kind of favourite time to be a QPR fan?
Well, I go back a long way, of course, and might mention some names that
Do yeah.
your listeners will have to look up in the history books. Alex Stock, Dave Sexton, and I'm missing out others. And we were great under Jerry Francis and all of that. But in recent times, the standout manager, of course, was Neil Warnock. Now, let me just tell you how little I know about sport, because on the day Neil Warnock was appointed our manager, I texted our little group of mates, the bad boys that go to away games, right? My Rangers mates. And I said, today is the darkest day in the history of Queen's Park Rangers Football Club, because I hated Neil Warnock. He was one of those managers that if he wasn't managing your team, he was such a wind-up merchant, and he was so irritating, that I think he was somebody that people kind of love to hate sort of thing. He was one of those characters, and still is. And I saw a wonderful interview with him on the telly the other week, and he was saying he wants the crowds to come back because he wants to be booed one last time. Right?
Nice.
Well, up until he took over as our manager, I had booed him on numerous occasions, and I was disgusted when he took over. Well, within about 15 months, he took a team that just avoided relegation out of the Championship into League One, just avoided relegation. He turned us round, and the following season, with the magical Adele in the side, and he was just unplayable that year, we won the Championship and got promoted. I mean, it was just an astonishing turnaround. And I now, of course, as a complete and utter rampant know-nothing hypocrite, adore Neil Warnock and always will.
And I'd say when the Middlesbrough fans found out that he was going to be managing Middlesbrough at the end of last year, they probably had the same idea. He's just one of those managers that just, you don't know how he does it, but he does it as promotions from the Championship to the Premier League. And I suppose onto that, and this is an interesting question. What's your favourite away ground you've ever been to?
Ooh. I have to say, New Year's Day, I think it was 1992. Correct me if I'm wrong. New Year's Day, Old Trafford. We won 4-1. New Year's Day, right? So I'm hungover as hell. I'm on the supporters coach, right? And you know what it is. I'm 6 foot and a bit, so your knees around your ears for most of the coach journey. It's particularly uncomfortable for hours and hours on end and all of that. Go to Old Trafford. Nobody giving us a chance of beating them. They're battling it out at the top of the league between them and Leeds, sort of thing. Dennis Law is commentating. It's on ITV because I've recorded it and watched it later. And we beat them 4-1. Dennis Bailey got a hat-trick. Hallelujah. Dennis Bailey was a man of great faith. And so we used to sing Dennis Bailey, hallelujah, hallelujah. And there we were at Old Trafford, stuffing them 4-1. Dennis Law claimed at half-time, when we were 3 up, I think, that it was due to the swirling wind. Because, of course, the swirling wind only adversely affected Manchester United and not Queen's Park Rangers. Yeah, it was great. And after the game, we've all poured back onto the bus. I am standing there, arms aloft, right, at the door of the bus, giving it to all the Man United fans. And a police officer comes up to me and he says, do you like it here? I said, yeah, I love it. He said, would you like to stay here a lot longer than you originally thought? I said, no, probably not. He said, well, F off and get on that bus then or I'll nick you. And I went, oh, United fan, are you? And I got on the bus. And it was just a truly magical, wonderful, unexpected day. So probably for that memory alone, quite possibly, Old Trafford. But I've done about 78 of the 96 league grounds over the years. And so I've got fond memories and heartbreaking memories from so many of them.
I'd imagine. I'm going to move away from QPR. Your favourite sports person of all time, and necessarily someone that you didn't have a connection with, but you admire greatly, and you, even to this day, when you kind of see them on the TV, you're kind of linked to them, and you immediately think of, their past glories, maybe.
No doubt. No one comes close. And I'm sorry, because you will have heard it before, said by many, many other people, I'm sure. Muhammad Ali, a giant, an absolute giant of a man, the most beautiful, wonderful boxer. And in fact, I treated myself to an hour on the sofa the other afternoon, and there was a program about Ali, and it featured at the end of the program the first Joe Frazier fight. 15 rounds. I used to do 15 rounds in those days. Of course, common sense has prevailed, and it's been reduced to 12. And there were many, many other clips of other fights there. And what he did, what he represented, his steadfastness in what he believed was right and what was wrong, and the fact that he was willing to make so many sacrifices rather than compromise, means that he stands as a sporting icon, in my view, head and shoulders above any other.
Yeah, and I think so many people will agree. I mean, you only hear of people my age, only hear about Muhammad Ali, and you see clips, and you hear stories from your dad, your uncles about it. And maybe move on to the Olympics. Your favorite Olympic moment, is that the Paralympics?
Yes, being there in the day at the stadium, London 2012, the Paralympics, was just the most moving experience ever, to watch these astonishing athletes performing at the very top of their game. Was really, really quite something. I can't go without mentioning Mo Farah, of course, and double and all that kind of stuff, and so many other astonishing people. And I know she came from north of the border, but I saw Dame Mary Peters on the telly the other day, and I'm that old that I remember her winning gold in '72 in the pentathlon. It was my awakening moment into the fact that women do sport, and it's lived with me, and it's been wonderful. And I'm not averse to watching a bit of the top level ladies sport. I thought the England ladies football team at their recent World Cup were quite brilliant in terms of their fitness, their intensity, their work rate, and of course their ability. So whenever I get a chance, I'm not averse to watching some of that.
And maybe finally, and I suppose it's a question I thought of asking, is one sentence, and if, say, for example, Kevin Parle was in listening, or someone that knows him or knows his whereabouts is listening, what's your one sentence to him, and sort of your quest to find him?
Please forgive me if I stretch it to maybe a couple of sentences.
The floor is yours. Go ahead.
And they might be long ones. Organised crime is harbouring and funding Kevin Parle, and I understand that because he has been an asset to them. Not a day goes by without me either discovering something or being told something about Parle, his network, and all of that. Now, I'm not in a position to threaten people because I don't have any guns. I don't have a gang. It's me trying to find him, and I will find him. Believe you me, he will be found. Imagine if I had a dossier, inches thick, old school money kind of like. Imagine a paper dossier as opposed to digital and stuff. A dossier that gave a thorough breakdown about the criminality that those around Kevin Parle are involved in, the who does what, the what goes where, the what goes in the other direction, and all that kind of stuff. It is quite possible that I could take all of that to the to the authorities, exhaustive as it is, and as a result, their potentially lucrative criminality could all come to a shuddering halt.
Mm.
Well, it doesn't have to be that way, because I didn't set out to discover about criminality, about who shot who, you know, other murders, and who serves up this, and who transports this, and who deals that. Although I've discovered a lot of that along the way. I am willing to keep all of that secrets forever. I won't tell law enforcement about it. That's not what I'm doing. I've got very, very narrow parameters. I just want to find Kevin Parle. I'll keep all those secrets secret if they surrender Kevin Parle.
Mm.
Then we can have a deal. If not, I can't make any guarantees that I will not go to law enforcement and tell them everything I know. And that might cause very, very serious, costly, huge disruption to a number of people. Come on.
Mm.
Surrender it up. He's no longer an asset. He's turning into a liability. Every person that listens to the podcast, reads the book, becomes aware of him, spreads the word, turns him daily more from an asset into a liability.
And he will be found.
He will be found. He will be found. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you so much for giving me this platform to speak today.
Well, listen, Peter, like I said, you've been unbelievable with your time. And for coming on, you know, volunteering yourself to come on and discuss this. Just for people listening, he is the Manhunting Kevin Parle. Check out the BBC podcast series, which we'll link, Manhunt. It's brilliant. I've listened to a good few episodes. I still have a few episodes to listen up on, and everything that's around it. His book is in, you know, bookstores. We'll link the one that Peter said at its cheapest. He's got his phone number, which we'll again link, his social media and everything. And just, Peter, lastly, the floor is yours. But before we go, thanks a million for your time, and thanks for coming on.
Well, we all hope that the world starts turning properly again, don't we? Of course we do. And your invitation to come over to Ireland again is putting a smile on my face, because I haven't been to Dublin for many years. I came out there working on a few occasions when I was part of a TV show called Murphy's Law many years ago with Jimmy Nesbitt in it. And I can't wait to go down Temple Bar or wherever you are kind enough to take me, so I can have a proper pint of the black stuff in the country of its origin. I can't wait. I'm a bit partial to a pint or two.
Well, if you want
of Guinness.
If you want a nice pint, you might stay away from Temple Bar. But listen,
okay.
that invitation is there, and we hope that we're inviting you over. Successful finding in Kevin Parle. Thanks a million, Peter. You've been unbelievable.
My pleasure. Thank you.